And let me just get my intro up here. And we have, thanks for taking the time to join us in these kind of unprecedented times, I guess we'd say. I'm Chris Williams. I'm VP of Digital at ACA. There's a couple of housekeeping items we just have to cover. Please feel free to ask questions along the way in the Q&A box down below, and Andrew's going to answer and address all the questions at the end. So we'll just collect them as you think of them. We're recording the presentation, and it will be available along with a copy of the slide deck, which will be hosted at ACA website behind your password. A little bit about the presenter. Andrew is the General Manager of Enterprise Brands at Feedvisor. It's an artificial intelligence-driven platform and managed service that optimizes the Amazon marketplace experience for major brands, from advertising and from the pricing to the content and the merchandising perspective. Previously, Andrew was the CEO of AdFin, North American president of Fast Digital, also my boss at one point in time, and held earlier leadership roles at digital creative and media agencies, including Publicis, Ogilvy, and Digitas. So, over to you, Andrew. Let's hear what you have to say about what's going on with e-marketplaces.
Awesome. Thank you. Assuming you can hear me, just checking in. All right.
Yep.
So thank you all for joining at this relatively this kind of lunch hour. And thanks to the ACA. As Chris mentioned, we have a long history, and I'm a big supporter, and we've done some great work in the past together. So appreciate the opportunity to talk to your members. Today is all about e-marketplaces, Amazon, and really our point of view, even before the COVID-19 outbreak, was that 2020 was a major inflection point year for brands to really embrace what Amazon and e-markets are all about. And so we're going to talk to you today about why that's the case. Most of our presentation, or a lot of our presentation, is based on a very large scale study that we did across over 1,000 brands that gave us really great insight into why, how, when they leverage Amazon and other e-markets like Walmart. And we want to use that information to kind of educate you. And in addition to that, given what's going on, we've added some hot off the press information related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so with that, I'm going to jump in. I will definitely ask you to type out some questions along the way if they come up, and we will do our best to address them towards the end. So with that, I'll try to get moving here. So the big question that I would ask basically everybody is, are you ready? Are you really ready as a brand, as a retailer, as a marketer, as a consumer? But are you ready for what e-marketplaces are all about? And are you really Amazon ready? Regardless of how you perceive yourself, regardless of how you go to market, the hint here is the answer is pretty clear. You need to be. There really is no opportunity at this point to kind of to not be kind of Amazon and e-market centric. So why is that? Let's start big picture, right? Big picture. Marketplaces have massively reshaped commerce and e-commerce overall in particular, right? We're talking $1.6 trillion was spent across the top 100 marketplaces in 2018. That's 50% of e-commerce, right? Now, you can look down this list. Some of them you're very familiar with. Some of them are much stronger in other markets in China or Japan. But regardless, you know, the factoid on the right is really unbelievable, given that in 2018, the world's online marketplaces sold more merchandise than every standalone retail website combined. Okay, so what you're saying here is, if you think about the amount of time and attention and resources that go into maintaining and building and optimizing your standalone website, which is still critically important, not saying it isn't, you have to realize how important these marketplaces have now become. And this is over, you know, probably less than a decade of a shift. So then let's talk about Amazon. That's really our focus because they are the epicenter. They have dramatically positioned themselves at the center of this in both the US, where now they are upwards of 38–40% of US e-commerce. And in Canada, that's not that far behind, right? In Canada, the data that we have kind of shows you somewhere in the 25% of e-commerce, $6 billion range across both the Canadian, they have the Canadian domain and the international domain. Amazon is really at the center here and has proven itself to be the most popular kind of online platform in Canada as well. And so the critical nature of e-markets and the critical nature of Amazon in particular is crystal clear. Just want to make sure I'm still presenting. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, it just looked like it went off. Okay, thank you. So now let's just transition a little bit, right? Things have changed over the last month, and Amazon was already in an incredibly strong position, but now the pandemic has only made them stronger, and all e-markets stronger, but Amazon in particular, right? We've now witnessed, you know, a second kind of black swan event in the last 20 years here, the other one being 9/11. You know, this rare, unpredictable event with incredible impact. But what we're seeing, we're all living every day, is it is totally reshaping the e-commerce landscape. You know, recently, you know, Goldman Sachs has put out that over, at least in the US, and I'm sure in Canada, the ratios are the same, you know, over 500,000 stores are going to temporarily close. So what does that mean? A lot are not going to reopen, unfortunately. But during this time, behaviors are changing, right? Consumers who did use e-commerce before are using it more. Those who never logged on before, never bought anything on an Amazon or a Walmart.com are now forced to, right? So now our behaviors are changing. Online shopping is accelerating. The Amazon, you know, kind of need for an Amazon is being solidified. And, you know, I kind of added this in because we're seeing the rich get richer. You know, Amazon as a company is getting stronger and stronger. You can see, obviously, their stock is one of the few that's going through the roof right now. But they're not just obviously a seller of product. They're also, they run AWS, they run Prime Video, and both of those are also profiting handsomely off of what's going on. So basically the point is their strength is growing, and so their importance is growing and their power is growing. Taking a quick look at some recent data that we thought would be helpful just to kind of put everything into perspective given what's going on. This was put out by Stackline about a week ago, and we thought it was a great chart, and it's really highlighting the fact that we've seen some dramatic changes year over year in how people are leveraging e-commerce. No surprise, lots of household goods and healthcare goods and home goods are kind of growing dramatically, where you have, you know, the number one item there, I know it's hard to see, is disposable gloves have grown 670%, no surprise. Bread machines kind of going through the roof. But obviously lots of categories are also suffering, right? And those would be all the ones that, you know, around travel and around, you know, different kind of experiences out of the home. You know, an event and supplies are way down. But I think what we're seeing here is a rebalancing and a reshuffling of what e-commerce is being thought about. And I think a lot of the things that are growing are going to have a lasting impact. So if I kind of shift to some data from Feedvisor ourselves, and we oversee and manage across clients over $3 billion in GMV. So it gives us some incredible insight into what's going on inside the marketplace. And so our own data over the last month has kind of, you know, solidified and kind of confirmed some of what Stackline saw there, where you see categories like grocery and gourmet food, which has historically been very, very slow to penetrate e-commerce, is up almost 40% during this time period. And you see beauty and healthcare growing. But as you would expect, clothing and shoes and jewelry are down. What I think is most important from this chart is where are we going to end up, right? And yes, there are definitely going to be some spikes. There was a lot of running out to the stores to try to stock up, and you see that in these numbers. But where are we going to end up, And I think that, you know, our data and our analysis looking at the market is that the new normal is going to, the new waterline for how e-commerce is going to play a role in our lives is without a doubt going to be higher in the future than it was in the past. And what that means is many of these categories that even the ones that are potentially suffering right now will more than likely see a new normal at a higher level of penetration via e-commerce and via marketplaces than they saw prior to the pandemic. So I want to just take a moment because it's always helpful to kind of get a sense of who's listening, and we thought it'd be helpful if you just did a quick poll. If you wouldn't mind, Davina can launch that and potentially just answer real quick from your perspective how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted your business. And we'll just allow that to generate and see if we get some information here that could be interesting to the group. I'm assuming, Davina, you have control over that. So interesting here, you wouldn't, because we ran a poll last week and we got almost the inverse. Not surprising, 83% have seen it negatively impact their business. Only one participant has actually seen an increase, and two have not really had much of an impact. Not surprising, obviously many businesses are feeling the negative impact. But helpful to understand some of the mentality of those on the phone. So let me move into some of our thoughts on this, and then I'm going to take us into some broader data as well. So just to kind of close out some thoughts on the pandemic and the opportunities and challenges. You know, in the short run, we do see this, and many of our clients are obviously asking, you know, for advice and for recommendations on what to do. And there is some quote unquote, good, some opportunity. There is obviously a lot of challenges, quote unquote, the bad. Without a doubt, there are categories, as we've shown, that are very much benefiting from the pandemic. And we would also say that we're seeing, given that many people have exited the market or are pausing on advertising spend, that is an opportunity now to kind of maybe gain share, potentially work on growing organic rank because there's less competition out there. So there is some opportunity right now in the short run. The bad, clearly, as we said, there are categories that are getting hurt badly just in general. They're just not something that consumers want to purchase at the moment. And obviously people have also really suffered from the fact that if you weren't considered an essential item, many of your items were delayed or suspended. So that fortunately is lifting and is getting better. And also the supply chain for many people got shut down. And that is also kind of fixing itself, and we believe over the next few weeks should get increasingly better. The real big picture here, though, is the long term, right? In the long term, the opportunities and the threats to each of your businesses are very real. And so I think there's that what I want to do for the rest of this is really now use the data we have to try to help you all think of how you want to strategize for the rest of 2020. So with that, I'm turning to the study that at the heart of this webinar. As we said, we did the study called Brands and Amazon in the Age of E-commerce. It was based on over 1,000 brands, predominantly US based, but there are Canadian companies in there as well. All this data is pre-COVID, so kind of mentally adjust accordingly, and I'll point out some points where we think that there's definitely some changes in the numbers that we're gonna see next year. But the report is available. It is extensive. It provides a very in-depth look at how people are using and viewing Amazon and Walmart, et cetera. But I'm going to take you through the highlights right now. So the first question that every company has to ask itself, if they have a relevant product to be sold in any marketplaces, to sell or not to sell, right? Do we sell on the platform or not? And our data shows that approximately 55% of brands, and I define, brands being companies out there with a known product, a known brand, a manufacturer of that good, they have chosen, 55% have chosen to sell on the platform. That is only slightly up from last year. But of those, what's also interesting here is that, almost half of them have really explored kind of a hybrid 1P, 3P model. I'm not going to go much into the 1P versus 3P benefits and challenges. We offer that as a separate both discussion and webinar, anybody who wants that. But just to touch on it, I think it's interesting that many brands have chosen to pursue a hybrid model because as we're seeing, Amazon is quite unpredictable. There is more and more pressure for brands from Amazon to push them off of 1P into the 3P marketplace. And there are benefits. There are challenges with being a 3P. Much more work to be done on the brand's part. But there are benefits as well in terms of increased control over pricing, increased control over inventory, as well as access to more data. So we do think this is interesting to see that. And we would also encourage companies to consider testing out maybe a subset of SKUs in the 3P marketplace because who knows, Amazon overnight could just force companies down that path if they're not already there. So why are these brands selling on Amazon, right? First, and this again is pre-COVID, e-marketplaces are seen by over half as a major growth opportunity. So first and foremost, it's just the opportunity is there. It's where the consumer is, it's where you need to be. And I think the benefits listed on the right are quite extensive of why these brands see the benefits. Clearly, participants were allowed to select more than one, hence all these in the 90s. But the fact that so many brands see this as a way to acquire new customers, a way to access customer insights, a way to gain market share. There are many benefits to being within the Amazon platform. But it's not for everybody, right? So if 55% are on, well, that means 45% are not. So 45% of brands have basically said, not for me. They have their reasons for not being on Amazon. The ones that are highlighted, there are many here, but first and foremost, not seeing it as necessary for their business. The other one that's high on this list is just that sense of lack of control, right? That once I cede control over to Amazon, I'm kind of losing control over my brand and my product. The one squeeze in the middle there is that idea of sending more people to their own online presence. And I challenge everybody with the data that we've already shared to say, really, you might need to think, is it really necessary or not now, especially post COVID? And also, as we said, marketplaces are outselling, online retail presence. So we would highly recommend that people really rethink this. And the data plays that out as well, right? So when we ask brands why you're not, and then ask them, would they reconsider or are they thinking about it? Well, almost half of those basically said, we're not there, but we plan to start in the next year. And so again, this is pre-pandemic. I imagine many more are actually going to reconsider it as well. But we think that these numbers could be, moving north next year as well. So that kind of sets the foundation for why not being there. I think the other major reason, and I'll kind of slow talk this slide, given the fact that I'd like everyone to take a second to read the cartoon. But the other major reason that has cited by many brands is the fear of Amazon itself, right? The fear of Amazon and their private labels as a continued threat, and the uncertainty of how they leverage data and how they compete. And so when we asked people, brands, who do they see as their competition? You can see here, almost a quarter highlighted Amazon's private labels in particular as a key competitor. And in a separate question, not listed here, when we ask brands, the vast majority of them not participating on the platform did highlight that one of the worst parts of selling on the platform is companies' exclusive, Amazon's exclusive brands and the fear of them. So this is a real issue, but one that can only really be dealt with if you take it head on. And that's what many of our clients are doing. Now, some have chosen to sell, some have chosen not to sell on Amazon. The key thing here is that you may not really have a choice. And this is a critical point for any brand out there that is on the fence or has yet to figure out how to engage with Amazon or other markets. So take a look at this slide, right? A lot of brands that you know well, whether it be Nike, whether it be Patagonia, whether it be Canada Goose, Pandora. These are brands that have either left Amazon or have refused to sell on Amazon. And they have all the reason in the world and all the right in the world to make their strategic decision to be on or not be on. But at the end of the day, not agreeing to be on Amazon does not mean you're not on Amazon. So a few examples just to kind of drill home the point to all of you is that, while Patagonia has chosen not to sell on Amazon, their customers are still shopping the brand, right? There are still people out there who are going to go in and type in a Patagonia sweater. And in this instance, well, they won't find it, but they will find all your competitors, right? And so effectively, they are being sought out, but not being found. And obviously that's a challenge and a decision that they have to face. But Nike's in a slightly different position on this example, right? Nike has chosen to pull all its product from Amazon. Again, fear of counterfeits is one of the major reasons. But that doesn't mean that their customers are not still experiencing the brand. In this example, the buy box is suppressed by Amazon, so there's no add to cart button. And that's, predominantly because Amazon probably has either determined that there's some wacky pricing thing going on, or the product could be fake, or it's an unauthorized seller, whatever the reason is, but it's still there. And the brand is still being experienced. Consumers probably really are ignorant to the realities that this may not be coming from Nike. And so it's still something to highly consider that your consumers are still experiencing your brand. In this last example, Canada Goose has said we're not going to sell, and again, they have all reason and potential not to. But unauthorized sellers are selling their products. And in this example, someone has gone out and looked for and searched for this Canada Goose parka, and it's selling for over $100 less than you would buy on their own website. So we've got price degradation issues, we've got brand issues. But again, from a customer perspective, they go to Amazon and they're finding the product they want, they're buying it, but they're not getting it from the brand, and the experience may or may not be the one that the brand wants them to have. So what does this mean for all of you? As I said, you may not have a choice of whether or not you're selling on Amazon. So it's critical that you be well aware of your brand and your competitors within these e-markets. You can't you can't stick your head in the sand. You can't ignore it, because this is where, as we said, over 50% of e-commerce is happening. And so if you're not present, you should, from our recommendation, be taking some of these next steps. And you should be identifying and tracking those who are selling your products, those who are unauthorized and selling it, those who are selling and making up new SKUs, new ASINs on the platform. It's also a way to keep track of new entrants and new exits. Likewise, there's policing that can be done, and there is kind of proactive management and mitigation that can be done to shut down people doing this, protect your IP, remove inaccurate content. This isn't easy, but it's all doable, and it's something we highly recommend that brands think about in 2020, because again, not being there doesn't mean you're not there. So I kind of want to transition though to one really key element of the marketplace and Amazon platform, and that's advertising. Amazon has managed to kind of sneakily grow to becoming the #3 digital ad seller after Google and Facebook. Nobody, everybody here probably is marketing themselves on Google and Facebook. The question is everyone taking advantage of what they can do and potentially want to be doing with the power of Amazon advertising? So kind of, I first start with just a little highlight of the fact that of the brands we talked to, and again, we talked to over 1,000 brands, 73% of them are advertising on Amazon, which has grown dramatically from the year before when it was 57%. And you can see not everybody's highly familiar with all the ad placements that happen within Amazon, and they're constantly adding, or not constantly, but they're exploring new ways to market and advertise on. But there's what's called sponsored brands, sponsored products, sponsored display, and then there's the entire arena of the Amazon DSP, which is much more into the programmatic audience buying world. All of them have shown amazing ability to drive return, but from the data we had, and you can see on the right, the one that had by far the highest return was the sponsored products. Regardless, they all have power. They all can work well. I mean, Amazon has done a great job of adding in new targeting features, and attribution capabilities are growing. So we think it's something that all brands should really be thinking about as they kind of plan for 2020 and beyond. And as I take that down a notch, the impact, and this is something we're seeing every day with our clients, the impact of Amazon advertising has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, more than most would imagine. Here we have 54%, so over 50% saying that they're getting great value out of Amazon advertising. I think when you dig in and you see the data on the right there, it really is eye-opening to the fact that we've got over 80% are getting a 4 times return on their investment, and almost half of them are seeing 7 to 10 times return on investment. I mean, those are staggering numbers for anybody in the media business. The ability to effectively put $1 into advertising and to be able to turn it into 4 or 7 or 10x is just incredible. And I think the fact that this is a platform that is optimized to sell is critical. And obviously that most people come here and come to the Amazon experience searching for product, searching to make a purchase. It is such a powerful opportunity for brands to really grow the bottom line. And then one more look at this, because I thought this was a really interesting stat. They got a lot of press when we actually put the report out, but 59% have basically said, not only is it powerful, it's more powerful than both Google and Facebook. And again, that could be a function of the fact that it's newer. That could be a function of the fact that it's more tied to directly to purchase. But regardless, those are the facts, right? And so that we're seeing that 59% of them have seen it having a higher return. And when you say, well, what does that mean for where you're putting your dollars? More and more are shifting their money from Facebook and social and Google into more of an Amazon experience. And our data showed here from polling over 1,000 brands that over half of these brands are now allocating over half of their budget to Amazon, which is pretty incredible set of numbers. So my point here is not to say that you need to be spending half your budget there, but what it is saying is that if you're not spending, it's something to explore. If you are spending, it's something to consider how to optimize and how to get to do even more, given all the levers now that Amazon is adding to their suite. And then just to turn, I've talked a lot about, selling. Amazon is optimized to sell product. It is optimized to sell goods. But it's become much more than that. And so when we talked to brands and we said, well, how do you see the platform? How do you see the platform and how does it function for you? And what stage do you, in the customer journey, do you normally see it? There was actually a pretty wide range of how people are using the platform. You can see here that, almost a third see it impacting the consideration stage, about a third almost the awareness stage. Purchase was, the third on the list here, where, you might assume it was number one. So I think what's important here is that brands are more and more realizing that given the incredible amount of traffic, the amount of high value prime audience, there's a lot more that can and should be done within these e-marketplaces than just trying to use it as a sales channel. And with that, here's an example where, they've introduced, the brand stores within the Amazon, and where you can take, a collection of products and you can transform that obviously into a microsite within the platform. And I think what's important here is just to realize that you can almost accomplish, not everything, but much of what you can accomplish in your own site, you can now slowly accomplish within the platform itself. And you can get across the brand positioning, the story, the benefits, can all be brought to life much more than they could a year or two ago. And it's one of the priorities of Amazon. It's one of the things our brands have been asking us to do, is to really up the game in terms of the content, the creative, the storytelling that can happen within the platform. And the data kind of confirms that, right? When we look at this, what are the strategies that you're deploying on Amazon? Clearly driving sales is number one, get it. But right underneath it is new customer acquisition and building brand, right? Two things that haven't historically been associated with an e-marketplace like Amazon. That it's all around finding new customers and building my brand is just a huge opportunity. And then one other that we've seen more and more that clients have talked to us about, and where we're helping people, is really to help them identify the competition. It's a really powerful way to understand who you're really up against. There's so much data that can be gleaned from the marketplace. Who's selling my product? Who's selling competing products? Who's entering the market? How are they pricing? How are they doing promotion? All of this can be learned by studying the marketplace, by pulling data, by analyzing it much more rapidly than you can ever do in a retail setting. And also you're identifying new players that you never even thought you were up against. And I think that's one of the kind of tertiary or secondary benefits of being out on the platform, is how much you can learn by what others are doing. And so I'm going to close this with how I started it and really say, are you ready? Are you as a brand ready for the fact that e-markets have come to dominate retail and have come to dominate e-commerce? As we started, well, we believe 2020 is that year, is that inflection point. And this was all pre-pandemic. This was all pre-COVID. This is a point of view which we were very bullish on before this all happened. But now we'd say, even especially now, it's something that brands need to really embrace. And so a few points there that we would just kind of close with, ask yourself, are you ready for quote unquote the new normal? And we don't know exactly where that's going to end up, but I would definitely bet it'll be north of where we were before in terms of what e-commerce means and what e-marketplaces mean to consumers. So now we're setting new expectations, new behaviors. We're going to have new competitors and opportunities. And we would say now is the time to get ready for this if you're not already there. And if you do have a strategy for Amazon, fantastic. But revisit it, refine it, okay? If you're selling on the platform, great. If you're not selling on the platform, make sure you understand why, Okay. But in all cases, if you do realize the importance and you do buy into the importance of being on these marketplaces, now is the time to double down. Hard to say. I know resources are tight and it's an interesting time to double down, but it is the opportunity is there to gain share, to gain positioning, to take advantage of advertising costs being lower. And obviously, we believe that the tools and the technology and the expertise to win is something that's incredibly important to invest in. Right? These are complicated channels. There's a tremendous amount of data that can be gleaned. There's a lot of learning. They're very dynamic. So there's a lot of tools and technology that can help. And so with that, I'll close just to say that I appreciate everyone's time here. We're here to help. This is what Feedvisor was built for, to help brands take advantage and optimize how they leverage and how they benefit from e-markets. We're Amazon-centric because the world is Amazon-centric, but we work across all modern marketplaces. And with that, I would love to close by just asking anybody here, we'll just throw up a quick poll. We'd love to be able to hear from anybody who wants to know more about what we do, how we do it, how we can help, or just wants to ask more questions about the survey in depth. We're more than happy to get your feedback. And so please answer that, and we'll move to any kind of Q&A.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was really amazing. It really sort of brings forward the sort of the combination of what we've been doing in search for so long, but enabled with the ability to get product right to the person's house. The other thing that I think is just really important is that what we wanted to do is start to see what's going on with marketplaces, specifically Amazon, but we also wanted to hear it from somebody else other than Amazon themselves, and so that you could bring up the things that you brought up about like private brands, because these are like massive concerns that our members have around how do you deal with that and how do you keep track of not only the private brands but also other party sellers who may be selling your brand without you. Just check the questions here. We've got one: is any activity on Amazon in the automotive industry?
Good question. I think in the Amazon, the Amazon we kind of all know and love is predominantly a B2C environment. There is a B2B platform as well. In the B2B side of the fence, which isn't something which is kind of as popular, there definitely is automotive product that is more parts and such, which are bought and sold. On the consumer side, it's usually much more of the I don't know what the exact right word is. It is still parts and accessories, I believe. I do think that we're going to see, though, and I've read some articles, I don't know if it's Amazon's aspiration or not, but obviously we've seen a lot more e-commerce getting involved with automotive sales. And in fact, the pandemic has accelerated that. I've read some interesting articles how now people are doing kind of full contactless, buying, selling, delivery for new vehicles. We've had it for used vehicles. So I will envision that there could be more happening in the future, but would be excited to potentially talk offline about what is possible, definitely in the B2B environment. That's
cool. Okay. One of the things you showed, it was dramatic in the chart that showed the timeline across the bottom of over the last, let's say, month or two. And it sort of showed that, it looked like there was a lot of new people sort of jumping into sort of like, oh my God, I got to get my bread maker all of a sudden, right? Because everyone needs to bake bread now for some reason. And I wonder, do you see any data where these are it's almost like a training session? You've got the new person who comes in that's trying it for the first time, and then you start to see them repeating, buying other things. And so it's actually a behavior change that might sustain over time. Well, yeah, that is the hypothesis. I don't know if there's enough data to prove it yet, but without a doubt, anecdotally, we can all imagine there's somebody in our family or our friends who were not highly adept
at leveraging and using an Amazon or other e-commerce. That either just wasn't their thing, they didn't get it, they didn't want to learn, whatever it might be. And over the course of the last month, they've been forced to kind of log in and buy things that either they just never bought anything before, or they, groceries are a great example where, myself included, I'd never bought anything through Amazon grocery wise in the past. Not that I didn't know how to, but I just never did. And now it's becoming more a staple of kind of our mental, how we go and do things. And I imagine, well, why is that going to change going forward? And I have a feeling that's playing out all across the globe, all across category, where you have people who are just realizing the simplicity of the system for categories that just never occurred to them. And when it shows up on their doorstep, I think that I don't know why they would turn off that behavior for certain things. I mean, certain things people might still want the experience, but I, without a doubt, and that's why we think the new normal, the new baseline is going to be higher, is a lot because of these behavior changes.
So you brought up the categories, and the question here is luxury brands on Amazon, and the retail experience is so important for luxury brands. It's part of the fun to go out and try and buy and be part of that experience. So how is that dealt with on Amazon, and how many big luxury brands are making taking advantage of this channel?
Well, I think historically it has been a laggard, right? Without a doubt, that luxury products, for all the reasons you mentioned, both price, quality, and really the fear of counterfeit has definitely been all a function of why luxury brands have resisted, if that's the right word, or maybe legitimately not been present. As I said, though, that doesn't mean, I haven't tried, but if you go type in Louis Vuitton, I don't know if you're going to be able to buy an LVMH bag right now, but someone might be selling it. And so I think that it also is in the definition of luxury, right? So there's a lot of product out there which is expensive, if you want to call it expensive. We work for some of the highest end electronic manufacturers who sell some very, relatively expensive product. They believe that they have a luxury brand, they have a premium brand. So they are there. But I think that for the things you might think about in terms of, like I said, like a Louis Vuitton bag or Gucci and stuff like that, they have been laggards. And will that change? I think the pandemic will be an interesting test case to see if they need to realize that if you cannot buy something at a physical presence, you have to find an alternative. And I feeling this will accelerate their move into this space. And there are ways to put some protections in place, working with Amazon to gate certain categories. So I would highly advise, this is a good time to explore and to play around if you are a luxury brand with how to sell some of your product on the platform.
What do you mean by gate certain categories? This sounds like there's a possible relationship between brands and Amazon to say, look, we're a luxury brand, and there's certain things that we need to have, for us to work with your platform. Help us out. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a process working with Amazon that most, some brands are familiar with, that Amazon has determined that some categories require permission to sell in. I don't know the criteria off the top of my head of how they decide which ones fall into that and don't, but there are instances where getting, because most of Amazon is an open marketplace where anybody can kind of set up shop and sell, but in certain categories you will need that permission to do it. And I believe most luxury product falls into that. But happy again to talk to anybody offline, and some of our marketplace experts can definitely answer that question.
Right. So you really have to sort of suss out exactly how you want to make this work. It's not as simple as just hey, let's just open up the pipeline and plop some product on there. You got to really plan it out and understand.
In some cases you can, but I would say that, what we advise clients all the time is we kind of have this process we call it kind of know your brands, control your brands, and grow your brands. And it's kind of like know before you jump in, like get smart. And that smart is knowing most likely if your product is probably already being sold, and you probably already know that. But how much, how many sellers, how many products, how many ASINs, how many of these products are not even authorized products? What price point are they selling it at? what's the, the throughput and the volume they're selling at. Knowing all that up front puts you in a much better position to then decide either which products to sell, what price point to sell, et cetera. So we highly advise clients to kind of get smart before they jump in.
Right. So one of the things that you showed was a Kraft Heinz brand experience, where product on one side and an explanation of the brand positioning on the right hand side. A question from the audience: are they open to building different brand experiences or category adjusted sort of consumer experiences?
So the way that, and that slide might not have been fully clear, what we're showing there is that there's kind of a before and an after, or a now and a could be. The current state is that many brands have not taken the time to kind of create their brand store experience. They haven't taken the time to put it all together into what Amazon offers, which is this ability to create effectively a microsite within Amazon. By not doing that, and by just putting your products out there, you kind of end up with that experience on the left, which is kind of like a hodgepodge of product, which is fully functional, but it doesn't convey the story. It doesn't convey the product in the way that I know the brand would want the product conveyed. The experience on the right was just a rough example of what could be done instead, right? Where someone enters, in this example, the Kraft experience, and then finds all the products in there with the right benefits and storytelling. That's all possible. Those experiences are, there are only so many ways you can do those with Amazon. It is somewhat of a tailored experience. Tailored's the wrong word. More of a, there are customizable elements, but there's only so many things you can customize. But within what they do allow you to do gives you plenty of wiggle room to create the story you want. It does require, somebody to create the creative assets. Amazon doesn't, I don't believe, offers those skills or those services. We do, other agencies do, any creative agency, obviously you work with, can create the assets. But part of what goes into that is not just creating the visual story on top. It's about then embedding all the correct copy, keywords, metadata, which functions somewhat a lot like Google does, where the only way you can rank organically in search results in Amazon is to have the right content and have the right keywords. That's where our AI comes into place. That's where a lot of the learning comes in, because you're in a very competitive marketplace. But I do recommend any brand out there that's got products should really explore creating, at a minimum, a simple brand store.
Early on in the presentation, you mentioned the terms, first party, third party. Can you explain a little bit about the differences between those two?
Sure. I had a slide, I don't think I have it in here, about 1P versus 3P. And really, without getting into tremendous detail, we do provide, anybody who wants, we have both a webinar specifically on that topic, as well as, experts on both. But I think what I'm just looking to see if I had it handy, but I don't. But 1P, basically 1Ps are selling wholesale to Amazon, and Amazon is the retailer. They are the ones who basically control your price and presenting your product. In that case, most major brands have started that way, both either by design or by Amazon's request to be effectively represented by Amazon. It's a simpler model. It's easier to get off the ground. You just have to basically fulfill weekly POs to Amazon, and they effectively take care of pricing your product. The downside, obviously, is you can't react to price. You can't necessarily react to competition because you're the wholesaler. You still are responsible for advertising the product and pushing traffic there. So that's kind of on the 1P side of the fence. On the 3P side of the fence, that's kind of what, the bread and butter of the marketplace. Most are third parties where they are the retailer, and they take responsibility for everything from, pricing and inventory, et cetera. And in that case, you have more control. You can react more. You can adjust pricing more. And we do offer, one of our core tools is a machine learning kind of dynamic repricer for brands to kind of win that sale. But the flip side is there's more work to be done, right? You're much more running a store. You're running that, and that just requires a little bit more commitment. And there are pros and cons on both sides. The rumors all out there are that Amazon is more and more pushing brands to, and may require more and more brands to become 3P. The rumor is they might want to get out of the 1P business, which would mean that, brands that have no experience being a 3P will all of a sudden get thrown into being a 3P. So hence we recommend, or recommend maybe strong, but to explore the idea of setting up a 3P store to learn and get comfortable with what it takes to run a 3P before, Amazon just wakes up one day and just tells you you have to be a 3P.
How much of that learning is applicable to all the other marketplaces?
That's a good question. I think it really is marketplace specific. And the reason I say that is, and I'm using the US kind of centric Walmart, as opposed to even the Chinese or, the Alibabas of the world. But each of them is taking a slightly different strategic approach on that. In conversations with both Walmart and Target, they are trying to potentially avoid some of what are the pitfalls of Amazon, right? The sense that there's so many people selling potentially fraudulent or counterfeit or unauthorized. And so they want to take a different approach. At least they've stated they want to take a different approach, which might mean that my understanding is in the Target environment, you potentially will need permission to sell almost anything. Which means that you won't have these, unauthorized third-party sellers. But the flip side is you won't have nearly as large scale of a marketplace, because it really means, if I understand it correctly, there would only be one seller per brand. So I think the learnings are applicable, but I do think that they're unique in the sense that the way Amazon works is unique, and I don't know that it will always apply to the other ones. But given that they are the elephant in the room and they're the biggest out there, you kind of have to build for them and probably adapt for the others.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks. That's really, really valuable. I don't see any other questions from the audience, so I'm going to let you go. Again, thank you so much for sharing this with us. I've learned so much about the marketplaces, but also thinking just how much we've learned over the past couple decades in search and organic search, and how applicable that is in sort of applying this into the retail space. It really sounds like there's a lot of smart people on the brand side that are doing other things that need to be brought into the conversation to look at the marketplace and go, show us what you do with organic search, show us how you do bidding, and off you go. So,
guys, well, thank you, everybody, and again, thank you to the ACA.
Okay, well, good to see you again, Andrew. I just wanted to remind everybody that we have the webinar, our next webinar coming up on May 4th with Shaylin Dar of Method Media Intelligence, where we're looking into what's being lost in digital media in terms of the leakage around the buys and the money being lost. We're calling it lost in transaction. Again, he is a deep expert on the programmatic side and understanding how the bid request turns into an ad on the screen and who gets paid and who doesn't get paid. So hope you can join us for that one, and we'll see you then. Cheers. Thanks very much, everybody.